the diplomatic reception on Celestial Station was supposed to be routine. Lieutenant Daniel Cross stood near the refreshment area, observing the gathered representatives from various species while trying to stay professionally invisible. His role as junior military liaison meant attending these functions, but not actively participating unless called upon. The Vel'kari delegation had arrived 15 minutes ago, and the atmosphere in the hall had immediately shifted. Everyone in the room was acutely aware of their presence, particularly of the woman leading their group. Commander Sareth Valeth. Even among Vel'kari, she was imposing. Nearly 7 feet tall, she wore ceremonial armor that somehow managed to be both elegant and unmistakably lethal. The patterns etched into the dark metal weren't decoration. They were kill marks, battle honors, formal acknowledgments of enemies defeated in personal combat. Her reputation preceded her. The Iron Empress, they called her. Undefeated in formal challenge duels. Architect of 3 successful military campaigns. Someone whose very presence commanded immediate deference from both allies and enemies. Daniel had been briefed on proper protocol. Don't initiate conversation with the Vel'kari commander unless she addresses you first. Maintain respectful distance. Avoid direct eye contact for longer than 2 seconds, as it could be interpreted as challenge to authority. He'd been following those protocols perfectly until she moved past him toward the central dais, and he made the mistake of actually looking at her. Not at her armor, not at her rank insignia, not at the ceremonial weapons she carried. At her, at the way she carried herself with absolute confidence that didn't need to announce itself. At the intelligence evident in her violet eyes as they surveyed the room, cataloging everything with tactical precision. At the striking angles of her face, the elegant line of her neck above the armor's collar, the way formal braiding in her dark hair somehow softened features that could have been harsh but instead were beautiful. Daniel realized he'd been staring for far longer than the recommended 2 seconds. More like 15. And worse, she'd noticed. Commander Sareth stopped mid-stride. Her head turned with predatory precision, violet eyes locking onto Daniel with the kind of focus that suggested she could calculate 17 ways to kill him before he finished breathing. The ambient conversation in the immediate area died instantly. She altered her trajectory, walking directly toward Daniel with measured steps that suggested incoming confrontation. Every military instinct Daniel possessed screamed at him to look away, to find something else to focus on, to remove himself from the situation. But he'd already been caught staring. Looking away now would seem like cowardice. She stopped directly in front of him. Up close, her presence was even more overwhelming. She towered over his 6 feet easily, and the armor made her seem larger still. But it was her eyes that commanded attention. Intelligent, dangerous, and currently fixed on him with an intensity that made the room feel suddenly smaller. "You dare look at me?" Her voice was low, controlled, carrying quiet menace that was somehow more threatening than shouting would have been. "Do you not know who I am?" Every diplomat and officer within earshot had frozen, clearly expecting this confrontation to end badly for the human lieutenant, who had apparently just committed a significant breach of protocol. Daniel kept his voice calm despite his racing heart. "I know who you are, Commander Sareth Valeth, the Iron Empress, distinguished military officer and leader of the Vel'kari delegation. Then you know that staring at me as you were, sustained eye contact that exceeds all bounds of respectful protocol, is interpreted as direct challenge to my authority, as an assertion of dominance. As an insult, I am permitted to answer with force. I wasn't aware I'd been staring for that long, Commander. I apologize for the breach of protocol. That doesn't answer my question. Why were you staring?" The question was delivered with precision that suggested interrogation experience. "What did you think to accomplish? What challenge were you offering?" Daniel made a decision. He could offer some diplomatic non-answer about being distracted or not meaning any offense, or he could tell the simple truth. "I wasn't offering a challenge, Commander. I was staring because you're beautiful, that's all." The silence that followed was absolute. Every person in earshot looked like they were watching a disaster unfold in slow motion, waiting to see how the Iron Empress would respond to what they clearly interpreted as either remarkable courage or spectacular stupidity. Commander Sareth herself went completely still. Her expressions cycled through several emotions too quickly for Daniel to identify clearly before settling on something that looked almost like confusion. "What did you say?" "I said I was staring because you're beautiful, Commander. I apologize for the protocol breach. I should have been more aware of the time. But that was my reason." Honest appreciation, not challenge. She studied him with an intensity that made Daniel wish he'd just apologized and walked away. When she spoke, it was in Vel'kari, rapid, formal phrases that Daniel's translation earpiece struggled to render clearly. This human speaks words that carry weight. Calling a warrior beautiful is either courtship declaration or calculated manipulation, yet his tone suggests simple honesty. "I am uncertain which interpretation is correct." One of her delegation members responded in Vel'kari. "Perhaps he does not understand the significance. Humans may use such words casually." Commander Sareth switched back to English. "In Vel'kari culture, calling a warrior beautiful, particularly a female warrior of my rank and reputation, is never done lightly. Such words carry implications of courtship intent or of calculated attempt to manipulate through flattery." "Which is your purpose, Lieutenant?" "Cross, Daniel Cross. And neither, Commander. I'm not declaring courtship. I don't know you well enough for that. And I'm certainly not trying to manipulate you. I have no authority that would make that remotely effective even if I wanted to. I was simply stating an honest observation. You asked why I was staring. That's the truthful answer. You speak without fear. It wasn't quite a question. Most show visible fear when I confront them directly. You show stress responses, elevated heart rate visible in your pulse, slight tension in your posture, but not fear. Why? Fear wouldn't help this situation, Commander. You're confronting what you interpreted as a protocol breach, which is entirely reasonable. You haven't actually threatened me beyond what's implied by your reputation. So I'm trying for honest communication instead of panic." "Honest communication," she repeated, as if testing the phrase. "You claim you called me beautiful as honest observation, without understanding that in my culture, such words are reserved for intimate contexts or for calculated social manipulation. You ask me to believe this was innocent mistake rather than deliberate provocation. I'm not asking you to believe anything, Commander. I'm explaining what actually happened. What you do with that explanation is your choice." She was quiet for a long moment, and Daniel couldn't read her expression at all. Then, "You have created confusion rather than the challenge I expected. I am uncertain how to respond to words that carry significant weight in my culture being offered as if they were casual observation. This requires consideration." She turned and walked back toward her delegation, leaving Daniel standing there wondering what had just happened and whether he'd somehow made things better or worse. Over the next 3 days of the diplomatic conference, Daniel caught Commander Sareth watching him multiple times. Not confrontationally, more like she was studying him, analyzing something she couldn't quite categorize. He did his best to focus on his actual duties and not create additional incidents. On the third evening, during a less formal reception, Commander Sareth approached him directly. This time her demeanor wasn't confrontational, more curious. "Lieutenant Cross, I wish to speak with you, privately." Several nearby diplomats looked concerned, but Daniel nodded. "Of course, Commander." She led him to a small observation room overlooking the station's docking arrays. Once the door closed behind them, she spoke. "I have spent 3 days attempting to understand your words from our first encounter. I researched human cultural contexts for complementing physical appearance, trying to determine if I missed some meaning or intent. And what did you conclude?" "That humans do sometimes offer such observations more casually than Vel'kari do, but that calling someone beautiful in a professional diplomatic context remains unusual, particularly when addressing someone of significantly higher rank with a dangerous reputation." She moved to stand near the viewport, her back to him. "In Vel'kari culture, female warriors face specific expectations. We must be iron, Commander, weapons without softness. We prove ourselves by rejecting any association with beauty or femininity, by embodying pure martial capability. To call a female warrior beautiful is to suggest she has failed to properly suppress those weak qualities." She turned to face him. "When you called me beautiful, you attacked the foundation of my self-understanding. I have spent my entire adult life ensuring no one would describe me that way. I have cultivated a reputation based on being feared, being respected for lethality and tactical brilliance, being seen as a weapon rather than a woman. And you looked at me and saw beauty, as if it were simple fact that coexists with everything else I am. It is a simple fact, Commander. You are formidable and beautiful. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. To my people, they absolutely are. A warrior cannot be both feared and beautiful, cannot be both weapon and woman. We must choose, and I chose to be the warrior, the weapon, the one who is never seen as anything soft or vulnerable or beautiful. Why? The question seemed to surprise her. Because that is what my culture demands. Because female warriors who show any hint of beauty or femininity are dismissed as unworthy of their positions. Because I wanted to be taken seriously, and that meant suppressing any quality that could be interpreted as weakness. Being beautiful isn't weakness. To Vel'kari warrior culture, it is. And I accepted that framework, built my entire identity around it. Became someone who could never be called beautiful because I had excised everything that might prompt such description. She was quiet for a moment, and then you looked at me, seeing me as I was never meant to be seen, and said words I had spent decades ensuring would never apply to me. You disrupted my carefully constructed self-understanding with one simple sentence delivered without fear or calculation. I'm sorry if my words caused you distress, Commander. Don't apologize. She moved closer. I am unsettled, yes, confused about how to integrate this perspective into my self-understanding, but I am also curious. You see me as both dangerous and beautiful, as complete person rather than merely as weapon. That is not how I have allowed myself to be seen for longer than I can remember. How do you want to be seen? She considered the question carefully. I don't know. I have been the Iron Empress for so long that I am no longer certain what exists beneath the armor and reputation. But your words suggested there might be someone more complete than the weapon I have trained myself to be. That possibility is both unsettling and intriguing. Over the remaining days of the conference, Daniel and Commander Sareth had several more private conversations. What began as her trying to understand his initial compliment evolved into deeper discussions about identity, culture, and the costs of living up to reputations. In Vel'kari military culture, she explained during one conversation, female officers face constant scrutiny. We must prove ourselves twice as hard, must never show anything that could be interpreted as weakness. I have succeeded by being absolute, by becoming someone who embodies pure martial excellence with no hint of softness, beauty, or any quality associated with femininity. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it is also how I achieved my position, earned my reputation, became someone respected and feared rather than dismissed. She paused. When you called me beautiful, you challenged the necessity of that choice. You suggested I could be both, could be dangerous and beautiful, feared and seen as a complete person. That contradicts everything my culture taught me about what female warriors must be. Maybe your culture is wrong about that. She smiled slightly, the first genuine smile Daniel had seen from her. Perhaps, or perhaps I have internalized their limitations so completely that I cannot see beyond them without someone offering an outside perspective. Like a human lieutenant who stared too long and had to explain himself. Exactly like that. You saw me without the cultural filters that tell you female warriors cannot be beautiful. You looked and saw someone complete, dangerous, and striking simultaneously. That honest perception revealed possibilities I had trained myself not to see. During one evening walk along the station's observation decks, Commander Sareth addressed something that had been implicit in their conversations. I have been considering what happens when this conference ends and we return to our respective territories. Whether what you have shown me, this possibility of being more than just a weapon, can survive when I return to the cultural context that shaped me. What do you think? I think you have changed something fundamental in how I see myself. I cannot simply return to being purely the Iron Empress, suppressing any quality that might be called beautiful, when you have demonstrated that such suppression is not actually necessary, that I can be seen as both dangerous and beautiful by someone who knows my reputation and is not diminished by that reality. She turned to face him directly. In Vel'kari culture, we have a concept, Keltara. It means sight that transforms. When someone sees you in ways you could not see yourself, revealing truths you had hidden. You gave me Keltara by seeing beauty where I had taught myself to present only danger, by seeing a complete person where I had learned to show only a warrior. I just told you what I honestly saw, and that honesty has forced me to question everything I believed about what I must be to succeed in my culture. To consider whether I want to continue suppressing parts of myself that you seem to find compatible with martial excellence rather than contradictory to it. She paused. I do not know what I will choose when I return to Vel'kari space, but I wanted you to know that your words you claim were simple observation, pierced armor I had built from power and fear and legend. They reached someone who had forgotten she was allowed to be anything other than a weapon. That is a gift I cannot easily repay. The conference concluded, and the delegations prepared to depart. On the final evening, Commander Sareth requested one last private conversation with Daniel. I return to Vel'kari space tomorrow, she said. I return to being the Iron Empress, to the expectations and the role that have defined my adult life. But I wanted to thank you before I leave. For what? For seeing me as more than a weapon. For calling me beautiful when I had spent years ensuring no one would describe me that way. For treating me as a complete person from that first moment when I confronted you for staring. She moved closer. You have given me much to consider about how I define myself and whether I want to continue living purely as a weapon. I cannot promise I will change everything. My culture's pressures are real and my position is hard one. But I can promise I will remember that someone saw me differently. Saw beauty alongside danger. Saw a person instead of merely a reputation. I hope you find space to be both, Commander. You deserve to be seen as all of who you are. Perhaps, she smiled genuinely this time. Thank you, Lieutenant Daniel Cross, for daring to look at me, and for saying the words that changed everything. 18 months after the conference, Daniel received an unexpected message from Vel'kari space. Commander Sareth Valeth was requesting his presence as a cultural advisor for a new joint human-Vel'kari training initiative. When Daniel arrived at the Vel'kari training facility, Commander Sareth met him personally. She still wore her rank insignia and carried herself with absolute authority, but something had shifted in her bearing, something more open, less rigidly controlled. Lieutenant Cross, thank you for accepting this assignment. I'm honored, Commander, though I'm curious why you requested me specifically. Because I wanted to see you again. And because this training initiative is attempting something new that you helped inspire. She led him through the facility to a large training space where Vel'kari warriors, both male and female, were engaged in various activities. What caught Daniel's attention was that many of these activities weren't purely martial. There were cultural discussions, artistic pursuits, activities clearly designed to develop warriors as complete people rather than just weapons. This is experimental, Commander Sareth explained. Over the past year, I have been advocating for Vel'kari warriors, particularly female warriors, to be allowed to develop identities that include, but are not limited to pure martial capability, to be seen as complete people rather than merely as weapons. How has that been received? With significant resistance from traditional factions who believe any interest beyond warfare undermines combat effectiveness, but also with support from younger warriors who have been hiding aspects of themselves they thought incompatible with warrior identity. She gestured to the training space. This facility is an experiment in creating an environment where warriors can be both capable and complete. What prompted this initiative? Commander Sareth looked at Daniel directly. You did. When you called me beautiful despite my reputation. When you treated me as a complete person rather than just a dangerous warrior, you showed me those identities could coexist. I could not ignore that possibility once you had made me aware of it. So I began working to create space for other Vel'kari warriors to have the same recognition. She paused. It has been difficult work, but every time I doubted whether this advocacy was worth the political cost, I remembered your words. Only because you're beautiful. You spoke them without fear, without calculation, just honest appreciation. That honesty gave me permission to see myself differently, as someone who could be both feared and beautiful, both weapon and complete person. Over the following months working on the training initiative, Daniel watched Commander Sareth navigate complex cultural politics. She faced criticism from traditionalists who accused her of weakening Vel'kari warrior culture. But she also inspired younger warriors who began expressing dimensions of themselves they'd previously hidden. During one conversation, she reflected on the changes. When you first looked at me and I confronted you for staring, I expected fear or challenge. Instead, you offered honest appreciation and treated me as complete. That single interaction changed my